I'm Frank Vaughn. It's September 2nd, 2025, as we march through this year. This month, as I indicated in previous videos, is going to be a busy one for me offline, so don't interpret any breaks in production as me being gone. I'm not gone, just there are some things I have to take care of, and I'm going to take care of them. In today's video, I want to talk about how civilizations, nations, don't fall overnight. These processes take weeks, months, years. They don't play out in real time in terms of on a visible change in your quality of life on a day-to-day basis. It's sort of like the frog in the pot slowly being raised to a boil. The thesis that I've been trying to make in my videos is that without drastic leadership intervention, without a drastic change of vision, Canada is a failed state. It is, or has been, brought to post-nationalism, as Justin Trudeau honestly told us when he said we have no core cultural identity and we are a post-national state. He was predicting the future, where his policies would take us, where the advent of multiculturalism would eventually deliver us. Now, multiculturalism was sold to the public as people of all ethnic backgrounds from all over the world coming to Canada and learning our culture, learning our institutions, integrating into what we were, similar to what happens in the United States. Because you can go to the United States and you can go into the same fast food restaurants that you will go into here in Canada. Everybody there sounds like an American. Everybody there speaks the language. Everybody there understands what it is to be American. It's unlike here in Canada, where you go into the same fast food chain, and you'll be lucky if you can find somebody that can speak broken English. Multiculturalism was supposed to be about us with the superior culture, with the superior country, bringing people in to become what we are. Instead, what we got is a denunciation of the magnet, of the thing, the nation that drew these people here in the first place, a denunciation and a repudiation and a targeting for destruction. Well, we claim these inferior cultures, which is what they are, any culture that enslaves a whole class of people, any culture that enslaves their women is an inferior culture. And there shouldn't be any shame when you talk about what we built in the post-war world for the nuclear family and the nations that we built, the magnets that we designed. There should be no shame in standing very tall and very proud that they were superior accomplishments. But for some reason, we have continued to elect these self-destructive politicians who are convinced that we, the cultural magnet, are indeed the evil. The place where everybody wants to go is the root of all evil and must be destroyed. It must be destroyed racially. It must be destroyed ethnically. It must be destroyed culturally. It must be destroyed religiously, because the only religion that's under attack in the West is Christianity. It's the only one that's cool to destroy. And it's not some kind of outside force, folks. This is the culture itself, the leadership itself. And when I say the culture, I'm also including entertainment. Making a conscious decision to self-destruct, to engage in self-destructive behavior, to hate itself. It's an act of self-hatred. And these other peoples, these other cultures, these other forces would be foolish not to step into that vacuum and try and take over, which is exactly what is happening. Before I get into the headlines, I was having a conversation with my wife the other night. We were talking about Canada, and we were talking about the fact that she descends from somebody who immigrated here from Holland 2 generations ago. And that though she considers herself of Dutch heritage, it's Canada first. It's Canadian of Dutch heritage. I think one of the mistakes we've made many mistakes as a nation, is we started describing ourselves as Indo-Canadian or Nigerian Canadian, African Canadian. We put this hyphen in, and Canada came second. French Canadian, English Canadian. If we were a nation and we had a backbone and we had a backdrop that was solid, if we had a foundation under our feet, Canada would come first. You would be Canadian of such and such heritage. Because at the end of the day, everybody in this country, including the native people, the First Peoples, came from somewhere else. Let's not kid ourselves. I don't know what happened before the Ice Age started to end, before we entered this interglacial period. I don't know who lived where and what was going on in the world. None of us do. We just have these ruins to fascinate us, lying all over the world, cities built on top of mountains. Nobody can figure out how it's done. Entire cities laid waste underneath 30, 40 meters of water under the ocean. Evidence of a time when there was a global civilization of pyramid builders that spanned the entire world and is now gone, and we remember almost nothing of it. I have no idea. But I can bet you if there was a global pyramid building civilization that spanned this entire globe, which there was, you can bet the people traveled with that civilization, that it was a worldwide civilization. I don't know much else about it, but I do know that we all come from somewhere and we're all going somewhere else. I digress. The fact of the matter is that over the course of time, nations change, geographies change, borders change, human constructs change where things are. Nations that existed fade away. But one of the things that remains is culture and people if the culture and the people is strong enough. So if you attack your cultural identity, if you attack the very basis of your fabric, not only will a nation disappear, but the people and the ideas that bind those people together will disappear, which is why post-nationalism and why this concept of Canada having no core identity destines us to be broken up and taken over by larger, better actors, people who have better identities, people who are stronger. And if we're going to live in a world where Canada is going to disintegrate, and it seems our politicians and our leaders are still committed to that pathway, they may say things, they may talk a good game, but there's no way to bring Canada back if we don't fundamentally change our language with how we deal with the world, if we don't develop a superiority complex. The best nations on earth have superiority complexes. Do you think China doesn't think they're the best? Do you think that the United States doesn't have this concept, this shared notion that they're the best? Canadians aren't supposed to say, we're the best. We're not supposed to build for we're the best. We're supposed to just lay down the red carpet whenever someone else wants to walk in. And if that's the case, if that's the best we can do, I want the Americans to walk in. That's where I want my lot to be. And you can call me a traitor to my nation, but you're sitting underneath a great big heap of traitors. The mountaintop is Ottawa. These people who have sold us down the river for decades, you're premiers. Don't look to me. I'm just a guy with a camera and some thoughts and opinions of my own who would like to see things be much different than they are. But the fact of the matter remains, they are what they are, and we've allowed it to happen. We have engaged post-nationalism, whether we liked it or not. And even the Conservative Party of Canada seems to, this government in waiting, have completely adopted this multicultural language, this notion. Even though they say certain catchphrases, they talk about Canada, they talk about strength and independence and freedom and all these things. They've lined up behind the liberalism that has destroyed this country. They still use the same language and the same terms, and they frame the conversation in the exact same bag of verbiage. And until that changes, Canada's on a one-way trip. The headline is, Ottawa tells CRA to fix its call center problem so more Canadians can reach an agent. You know, once again, here I am. Feeling sorry for the bureaucrats. Because it's an absurd thing to come out of your mouth. You're sorry for the bureaucrats. You're sorry for the people that are subject to this. It only extends so far. The government, under Justin Trudeau, in its so-called pandemic responses, created this CERB program, which the CRA is tasked with clawing back because anybody who claimed it got it, even if you didn't qualify. So the idea was send the cash out and we'll get it back when it's all done, creating this bureaucratic nightmare for the bureaucracy. There were the loan programs for businesses. Again, if you applied, you got it. Didn't matter if you qualified. And then the government said, you know what? We overpaid a lot of people, So it's the CRA's job to figure out how to go and get it back. So we create the program and before we even got to the stage where they had to go and claw it back, the government said, we're announcing the CERB program, we're announcing this money handout, and tasked the CRA with dealing with it. So they said, we're going to do this thing, but actually you're going to do it. You're going to figure out how to do it. Now, the CRA is like any other institution in this country. It's faced with labor shortages. It's faced with skilled labor shortages. It's faced with people whose work ethic has deteriorated massively since the pandemic, the so-called pandemic. You have vast quantities of low-skilled labor flooding into this country who can't particularly do this job. They can't even operate a call center properly. So, at any rate, in the government's infinite wisdom, they even tried to do that, the capital gains tax rate increase without approval from Parliament, setting all that aside. They said to the CRA, we're just going to arbitrarily raise taxes. It's up to you to administer it. So the CRA had to update all of their forms. They had to update their website. They had to go through all this work for then the Carney government to come along and say, we changed our mind. We're not doing that anymore. So in the middle of tax season, you had forms going out to people that had inaccurate information. They didn't have time to update it. It created a nightmare. So all of these nightmares, which are a creation of government that have been saddled onto the bureaucracy, the CRA and other departments of the bureaucracy, now Ottawa's come along in response to a CBC News article. The CBC is so proud of himself. Directive follows CBC's story about frustrated Canadians facing difficulties reaching the CRA by phone. You should be able to reach the CRA by phone. That's not the issue. CBC is so proud of themselves and their $1.2 billion funding that they were able to get Ottawa to do something, to advocate. So what did Ottawa do? They issued a directive and said, Canada Revenue Agency, you have to fix your problems in 100 days. That's it. That's all they did. They just issued a directive. And CBC is just celebrating this like it's some huge win. The service delays and access challenges Canadians are experiencing from CRA call centers are unacceptable, wrote Champagne. He said the agency has been instructed to take concrete steps to fix the problem, including reallocating and adding personnel, piloting a new call scheduling system, and expanding digital services. So this is the chair of the standing, this is the Minister of National Revenue, François-Philippe Champagne. So a member of the government that broke the CRA is now yelling at the CRA to fix their problems. The government did this, not Parliament. Parliament rubber stamped the government into place, but the government created all of this burden and broke the Canada Revenue Agency. What good is a government that can't effectively collect taxes or communicate with the taxpayer? So once again, my shock and surprise, it's been a trend for the last 4 years. I feel sorry for the CRA. They're getting blamed for the mess the government made. And once again, I'm not trying to pick on individual postal workers when I talk about what I'm about to talk about. Some of the best people that I've met in my life have actually been postal workers. Some of the most noble people. Some of the people that would bend over backwards to help you. Now, there are others, but I don't want to call attention to the others. This is about business. This is about practicalities. Canada Post lost $407 million in the second quarter, in 3 months, tracking towards a $1.6 billion loss, says customers seeking out other parcel carriers. So it's no surprise. Canada Post went on strike during Christmas. They thought they were sending a message to the management, but what they did was they screwed their customers. Not only are the customers getting screwed with very high parcel rates, there's scratch the surface of the internet and you'll find some eBay seller complaining about postal rates. It's actually ridiculous. I just had to order something off eBay, and the amount of post I paid, I think it was $32 on an item that didn't weigh a pound, and it was a $50 item. So all told, by the time it got here with taxes and everything else, it was like a $50 transaction turned into $90, and that's thanks to Canada Post. They went on strike during Christmas. They screwed their customers over. And then during tax season, they threatened to strike again. But somebody figured out that it might not be the best idea, so they just canned overtime and delayed everybody's packages. So they're punishing their customers, the only people who are paying the money, because it's a crown corporation. The customer who's paying for everything is the one getting screwed. And why are they getting screwed? Because the postal carriers believe they're entitled to a lot more money. In spite of the fact, whether they're underpaid or not, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're underpaid. There's a company out there called Intelcom, which is run by, as far as I can tell, everybody that's ever delivered packages to me when I was in Ontario was of Sikh background. So it's probably a TFW thing. UPS is out there. There's all these other carriers that are able to do things profitably, whereas Canada Post, the union thinks that they deserve all this money in spite of the fact that they lost $400 million in one quarter. The subtext is Postal Service reports largest quarterly loss as contract talks drag on. Why are there even contract talks? Why is there even a negotiation taking place? If Canada Post can't make money, then there isn't money to pay increased wages and benefits. And for all those individual Canada Post workers who, again, I love, it's just a matter of math and business. There's got to be some kind of change, but the last thing anybody wants is change. And potentially you could see another strike, which just screws the consumer again. So why would you be shocked that people are seeking private options, some of them American-owned, because they know how to make money and they know how to run businesses? This is just symbolic of the decline and fall of Canada. This rampant sense of entitlement that permeates everything about our society. So it's not just workers, at least Canada Post people are working. There are the recipients of various forms of welfare who are demanding that it is raised to match the cost of living. There are parliamentarians who are constantly giving themselves raises. There's a whole class of pensioner who don't want the bad news that the country's broke and the pension obligations may not actually be there, may not actually be solvent. A whole class of people who paid into the system, but at the same time as they paid into the system and they lived their working life and they paid their taxes and did everything, the government was allowed to give the country away. No one was ever held accountable by the citizenry. Everybody just wanted to be left alone. They wanted to go on their cruises. They wanted to go on their tour trips. They wanted to cash each and every pension check as it came in, and they didn't care where it came from or what was sold off to insure it. They're entitled to it. So if the nation breaks because of all the entitlements, nobody cares if it can just be pushed off 1 or 2 more weeks. We can't afford it. We squandered it. The national treasure house is empty. We dumped all our gold under Stephen Harper. It was finished under Trudeau, but the lion's share, and I'm going from memory here, the lion's share or a very significant share was sold off under Harper. We don't have any gold reserves. All we have is fiat. Fiat printed against the revenue of taxpayers, and there's fewer and fewer of those. As we talked about in the last video, capital flight from Canada accelerating, and how there's no reversal. Look at this. Investment performance can be improved. Real private non-residential investment. Canada, through the floor. We're just flatlined as the Americans have recovered and started to grow. Now, the real story here, what's this one? Standard of living in decline. This is another one. So, American standard of living is still improving. Could probably improve more. Canadian standard of living is flatlined and declining. It's just the way it is, folks. It's just the truth. Everybody wants to tell you how great Canada is. What else we got here? New condo apartment sales through the floor. So I admit this little segment's a little bit all over the place because I'm looking for one graphic and I'm not able to find it, the one that I really want. This is the graphic that I was looking for. Canada's population nears 41 million. And this data is now a year and a half old. So our population's probably somewhere near 42 million. because we're still dumping people into the country. What people need to understand is I'm trying to provide you the evidence to break through that media narrative that everything's fine in Canada and we're the greatest country on earth with the greatest healthcare and the greatest this and the greatest that. And you see the homeless camps in your public parks and you see the needles littered all over underneath your feet. You see people smoking meth and shooting up on public transit. And somehow, I guess because you're staring at your phone, I'm kind of divorced from culture. I'm never on my phone. I keep my smartphone as stupid as possible. It does text messaging and some voice chat with certain individuals. Otherwise, I'm never on it. I leave it in the office when I go to the rest of the house. Like, I think they're one of the most addictive things on the planet. People are on them all the time. You should really train yourself to use it less and less and less. But is that why people can't see what's all around them? They can't see the evidence of their eyes? What happens when a country is adding millions of people, low-skilled, poor people, who have no cultural basis, no cultural backdrop, no loyalty to the nation? Don Cherry had his entire career canceled because he pointed out something obvious. The so-called new Canadians don't wear poppies. They have no link to our heritage. They have no link to our history. They don't care about us. They don't care about treaty rights. They don't care about reserves. They only care about what they care about, which is framed by their backdrop in stronger, dominant cultures, which they intend to impose on Canada because we're so weak. Like a prostrate, we're prostrate. Anybody can take advantage of us. In spite of the fact that our population is growing in leaps and bounds, mostly from immigration because we're only having 1.3 babies per woman, which is a whole other problem. If people don't have families, and this isn't about the people who can't have kids who've tried, there's lots of them out there. The people who have had one kid and then had 10 miscarriages, I'm telling you, there's so many people out there with so many individual circumstances. This ain't about you. There's a whole pile of healthy people out there who have chosen to be selfish hedonists and not have children because they think that that's the best that they can ever do. That their life of self-indulgence, most and often more than I'd like to see, the very same people who've made the decision that they're not going to have kids because the world's such a terrible place, hypocritically still get up every single day and enjoy the indulgence of themselves. All the while, they're running from the best experience they could ever have. Smart people. Because not everybody should have kids. That is for frickin' sure. When you look at the state of foster care, you look at the state of child abuse and the rabbit holes that I've gone down in that vein, and the people that I've talked to, it's like I don't even want to make a video about it because it's so horrible. But it's the smart people. It's the culturally engaged people. The people that we need to have babies aren't having babies. But somehow we're managing to grow, and that's because of all of this net third world migration, almost half of it coming from India, and then another chunk coming from China, which isn't third world admittedly, but they got the same birth rate problem we do. And we're not just bringing in young people; we're bringing in a lot of dependents right out of the gate. I showed in a recent video 1.6 million Canadians, first generation Canadians, who are on disability, collecting benefits, those entitlements that I was talking about. When a nation is growing this fast, but you can't sell condos, your quality of life is in perpetual decline. The purchasing power of your dollar, the GDP being largely fakery or made up of money laundering or made up of drug trafficking, as we have shown on this channel, giving you all the evidence, when the GDP can barely keep up growth, when the only sector that is growing with any sense of rapidity is the public sector, which is the government sector. When people talk about growth in other areas of the economy, this even where there isn't really growth, let's just pretend there is growth. Those jobs the TFWs are occupying instead of Canadians are lumped into that GDP. It's part of the gross domestic product. So, like, all I'm trying to say is, if you're having a real estate price collapse, which is underway in Toronto and Vancouver and some of the most hyperinflated markets, when you can't sell condos in the GTHA, when people can't afford the exorbitant prices being charged, and yet you still have millions of people flooding into the country, these things are all indicative of how broken it actually is. Now, on a day-to-day basis, you get out of bed, you do whatever it is you do with your time, and you go to bed at night. It doesn't feel like it's any different. Inside of your world, inside of your view, inside of the individualized experience of your life as you navigate Canada in your own way, it doesn't seem so catastrophic. But it's never, people think collapse is straight over a cliff. You jump off the ledge and you splash into the water and you break your back and you're in the hospital. Like you think it's this catastrophic, huge, monumental event. It happens all at once. That's not how it goes. Even the Second World War. So the Germans invaded Poland and kicked off the whole thing. Within 30 days, Poland had collapsed. The Soviets and the Germans had divided the thing up. And then the next phase of the war was called the Sitzkrieg. For months, nothing happened. No one shot anybody. And in those months, maybe people could have faded into normalcy bias. The collapse of the Roman Empire didn't happen in one day. It happened over decades. The collapse of the Soviet Union, for what it was, didn't happen in a day. It happened over years. And people didn't wake up one morning and it was all gone. It just slowly trickled away. And Canada's well into the trickling away part of the story. And I don't tell you this to be an extremist. I don't tell you this to market fear. I tell you this because it's reality. Which is why my message on this channel has been we need a brand new way. Canada itself needs a new system. If there's going to be a Canada, there has to be some kind of revolutionary vision. Hopefully it's a peaceful revolution. But we're talking about someone who comes along and says the citizens deserve better. If we're going to have a nation that deserves better, we got to strengthen the borders. We got to kick out the TFWs. We got to have a conversation about immigration. Axe the tax ain't going to cut it. Axe the tax 2.0. I think that's what they even called it. Axe the tax 2.0. My God. It's a snooze fest. It's not equal to the challenge. Canada is facing an existential crisis. And these people are, I can't even come up with a word. They're just babbling on in front of microphones, talking about talking points and axe the tax. It's not going to save the country. If we can't save Canada, then we need some vision in the provinces that have vision to get off the ship and try and get on board with something else that's going on out there. If we only have a choice between being dominated by Europe and China and the United States, I'm going with America. Why am I going with America? It's the only game in town. The administrative state is under attack by the Trump administration. They're trying to take it apart, this great big Gordian knot. The problem with the United States is it has a republic core. Has a core that's a republic, but it's a global empire. The only way an empire survives is through authoritarian rule, and then it doesn't last very long. It's not even a historical lesson. It's like anthropological. Certain things don't scale up. Republics haven't been able to scale up. So you have an administration in the United States that's saying, you know what? We got to try and peel back the empire a little bit. Sure, we have all these expensive aircraft carriers and F-35s and all this highly technical weaponry that is massively destructive when you're bombing Houthis and backwards nations. But against peer competitors, it's just missile fodder. War, Third World War, a war between the great powers is just not, it's not feasible in modern times. It's the first time in thousands of years. And maybe in the course of human history, we don't know what was going on 12, 13,000 years ago. So you can't say firmly, I can't say firmly. But at least it's the first time in 12, 13,000 years where warfare is just off the table. We can't do it. We can't fight a world war. Nuclear weapons render it irrelevant, so we have to get along. The empire is overextended, and there's an administration in the United States that recognizes this and is trying to pare it back. And it may be an impossible task, but at least there's somebody there trying. At least there's somebody there who's willing to tell some of the truth. I would almost say most of the truth. I've had problems when it comes to Epstein. I've got problems when it comes to the somehow American national identity seems to be bound up with Israel, that if you're not a 100% proponent of everything Israel does, you're a bad American. I think that's terrible logic. And I think there's people in the online space who are pushing that notion as well, that anybody that wants to talk about the Palestinian Christians that are being slaughtered and how Israel said, look, if they don't want to just leave their churches and leave their homes, they're enemy combatants and we're going to kill them all anyway. You can be pro, and this is the biggest issue too. You can be pro-Israel all you want. You've got two peoples who are completely incompatible. If the Palestinians and the Arab world were in a position to do so, they would kill every last Israeli and drive them into the sea. So it's not really surprising that Israel is doing what it's doing. My question, or my philosophy on this has always been, who makes a better Canadian citizen? Who is burning my streets? Who is smashing my institutions? Who is laundering money and funding terrorism all around the world right here in Canada? Like, my business is Canada. I want Canada to be better. I don't really care about all this international affairs. Part of peeling back the empire is getting out of all this business and letting it sort itself out. But I do find it extremely weird how, George Washington talked about how a nation should have transactional relations with other nations and should never allow a core part of its identity to be defined by another national identity or another cultural or another ethnic identity. The founding fathers thought about all this stuff. It's actually really cool. Anyway, problems aside with the Trump administration, problems aside with their battle with the deep state, they're the only game in town when it comes to trying to deconstruct and downsize the empire and save the United States and focus on rebuilding it and doing something different. And Canada just wants to fight with them. Fight with the people who are responsible for a huge part of our real GDP, not the fake fictional rents, not the fake estimates of what your frickin' garden's worth. Your little garden in your backyard, there's an estimate that's fed into the GDP of the economic value of that. Not money laundering and drug trafficking. What we actually make and send to the United States, what we actually produce, we're attacking our biggest buyer. What more can I say? Now, I'm going to say a lot more. So that's kind of what I do now. I say things. I think about things. I put them together. I make videos. But that being said, there's going to be some gaps in September. There's personal stuff I got to deal with. And I don't want to get into it, but it's going to be here and there. And luckily, the camera only shows what it shows. And so we should have some sort of continuity of service, but don't worry about gaps. I appreciate every one of you. And for those of you who, because this is part of it too, you've got people who send $5 or $10 to support the channel with $5, $10, $20. And so many of them, when they come in, they're accompanied with messages like, I'm sorry I can't do more. I'm on a fixed income. I'm sorry I can't do more. Life's expensive. None of you should be saying you're sorry. And for those over the course of the 8 months who have sent larger amounts, clearly you have nothing to be sorry for as well. But as a percentage of disposable income, sometimes those $5 and $10 donations land larger than their impact because there's just so little left over at the end of the day for people. And I just, whether it's, the amounts don't matter. The reason I put this out for free and the reason I don't monetize is because I just don't want financial barriers for anybody. But likewise, I want everybody to know that I'm not going anywhere. So even if there's gaps, I'm not going anywhere. This is a long-term thing. It's converting into a long-term thing. For as long as I'm allowed to, because God only knows. I watch what's happening in Britain. Actually, let's just bring this up for a minute. British comedy writer arrested for 3 gender-critical tweets and hospitalized as a result of the arrest. Britain is undergoing a humiliation ritual, which I think our current political leaders want to bring to Canada. This is a huge national humiliation where the culture that built the magnet is being attacked mercilessly by their government, by the people who elected them, by the people who hope for some kind of change. There are thousands of people being charged for memes and put in jail for memes at the same time as there are assault gangs still roaming the street. At the same time as there are machete attacks, only coming from one particular ethnic direction, these people are being protected by the state apparatus, while people who tweet and who make posts are being arrested. This could come to Canada, and if it does come to Canada, to one degree or another, yours truly will be caught in the crosshairs of that. But barring some kind of intervention by the government to shut down free speech, I'm going to be here. That's the only point I want to make. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one.